Hello everyone, this is JC Mayor Marata, your pre-service teacher. So for today, we are going to discuss another lesson, which is Lesson 7, Mandated Topics Issues. And we are going to talk about the first issue, which is the Philippine Constitution. The Philippine Constitution has issues centered in the following constitutions. First is 1898 Malolos Constitution, the 1973 Constitution, and the 1987 Constitution. And the issues concerning the 1899 Malolos Constitution will be discussed later on. So, the 1899 Malolos Constitution was the first democratic organic law ever made by the Filipinos. It was written by Felipe G. Calderon, a Filipino lawyer and a descendant of a Franciscan friar of Santa Ana, Manila, with the advice of Cayetano Arellano, a brilliant lawyer. This constitution was borrowed from the Constitution of France, Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Guatemala because the Filipino resembled the people of these countries in religion, culture, and psychology. So the Constitution established a free and independent Republic of the Philippines. It created a popular representative government based on the three separate powers of the executive, legislative, and judicial power. But the most crucial and contentious issues in the Revolutionary Congress that created the 1899 Malolos Constitution pertained to the separation of church and state, which was by a mere one vote. Until now, this episode in Philippine history has not received a satisfactory explanation. So the debate in Malolos was profoundly divisive because the two sides were driven by differing visions of national community. A crucial point was the Philippinization of the Catholic Church, which the proponents of church-state unity championed and which their opponents sidestepped. Even as the debate raged, however, Aguinaldo's revolutionary government acted on the church-state issue out of political expediency. So in the end, the issue that the Filipino elites could not resolve was settled by the US colonialism, which imposed church-state separation without Filipinization. The second issue is the issues of the 1935 Malolos Constitution. The 1935 Philippine Constitution was drafted by the delegates of the Constitutional Convention, who were elected in 1934. Claro M. Recto was elected president of the convention, and the delegates crafted the 1935 Constitution. So, salient features of the 1935 Constitution include bicameral legislature composed of a Senate and a House of Representatives. The President is to be elected to a 4-year term together with the Vice President without re-election. The rights of suffrage by male citizens of the Philippines who are 21 years of age or over and are able to read and write. And extension of the right of suffrage to women within 2 years after the adoption of the Constitution. The draft of the Constitution was approved by the Convention on February 8, 1935 and ratified by the President Roosevelt in Washington, D.C. on March 25, 1935 and not by the Filipino people. So elections were held in September 1935 wherein Manuel L. Quezon was elected as the President of the Commonwealth. So the 1935 Constitution provided the legal basis of the Commonwealth government, which was considered a transition government before the granting of the Philippine independence with American-inspired constitution. So the Philippine government would eventually pattern its government system after American government. Controversy divided the Philippine legislature with a debate on the acceptance or rejection of the hair horse cutting bill, home by Osmania Oroja's mission from the U.S. Congress in 1931, which provided for a 10-year transition period before the granting of Philippine independence. And the passage of the Independence Bill resulted in the splitting of Democrata Party and Nacionalista Party into two factions. So the pros and antis. Majority in the legislature led by Quezon and Recto rejected the said bill, the hair horse cutting bill, thereby composing the antis, while the pros became the minority under Osmania Rojas and others. So on October 17, 1933, Quezon and others triumphed in this battle as the Philippine legislature rejected the bill. So Quezon eventually brought in from the United States the Tidings-McDuffie Act, authored by Senator Millard Tidings and Representative John McDuffie. So, a slightly amended version of the hair horse cutting bill signed by President Franklin Roosevelt on March 24, 1934. So the bill set July 4 after the 10th year of the Commonwealth as date of Philippine independence. So this was accepted by the Philippine legislature on May 1, 1934. The third issue is the issues on the 1973 Philippine Constitution. In March 2016, Tony Lavinia made historical account entitled Travesty of the 1973 Constitution. It is presented hereof with some modifications. So while reformists called for the convening of the 1971 Constitutional Convention, the Marcos forces eventually hijacked it. So as a consequence, the 1973 Constitution was turned into a tool by the Marcos regime to perpetuate itself in power. So having declared martial law earlier, Marcos issued Presidential Decree No. 86 calling for the cancellation of plebiscites and instituted barangay citizens assemblies to ratify the new constitution by a referendum from 10 to 15th of January 1973. So this was challenged before the Supreme Court in what became known as the ratification and plebiscite cases. So while the case was being heard, Marcos issued Proclamation No. 1102 certifying and proclaiming that the 1973 Constitution has been ratified by the Filipino people and thereby was in effect. His proclamation was questioned in Javellana v. Executive Secretary, which saw the Supreme Court severely divided on the issues. So despite the voting, the court decision stated in its dispositive portion that this being the vote of the majority, there is no further judicial obstacle to the new constitution being considered in force and effect. So in that case, then, there is no Supreme Court ruling that the 1973 Constitution has been validly ratified because 6 out of 10 justices held that there was no valid ratification in accordance with Article 25, Section 1 of the 1935 Constitution, which provides only one way for ratification. So, moreover, the Supreme Court could not be considered an outright decision on the merits. Nevertheless, because there were not enough justices to grant the petitions to nullify Proclamation 1102, a majority of justices agreed on the formula that there was no longer any further judicial obstacle to the new constitution being considered in force and effect. So the Javellana decision removed the final legal obstacle to institutionalizing an authoritarian regime in the Philippines. So later on, because of this legitimation by the Supreme Court, Marcos and his supporters would claim that his regime was one of constitutional authoritarianism. And Chief Justice Roberto Concepcion, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, dissented from the Javellana case and famously added, "I dissent." So right after the dispositive portion. So disappointed by the court's decision, Concepcion would opt for early retirement. So later, he would have the last word, as in the Chief Justice would later chair the Judiciary Committee of the Constitutional Commission that would draft the 1987 Constitution in the latter Constitution. So, Concepcion made sure that never again would the Supreme Court shirk from its solemn duty to decide the most important disputes in our society. So, during its lifetime, several amendments to the 1973 Constitution were introduced. So, these were initially either initiated primarily to perpetuate Marcos one-man rule as exemplified by the aforementioned amendment. Number 6, or introduced to construct some resemblance of democracy to his unpopular regime by experimenting with various political systems, like the French presidential system. So the referenda and plebiscites that were conducted to ratify the amendments were all rigid, orchestrated, and made possible by his total control of government agencies like the bureaucracy, the military, and the Supreme Court. Now, the last issue is issues in the 1987 Philippine Constitution. So, the 1987 Constitution had some doubts, conflicts, and controversies. These include the death penalty, economic policies, land reform, form of government, and even the retention of American military bases in Clark and Subic, among others. So, other issues are choice of the presidential system over a parliamentary system and a unitary system against a federal system. So the three branches of government are separated and equal, but neither is true to formally and in the operational code of actual exercise of power. So the president has almost had total control of the budget, which explains why legislators easily abandon their political parties to join the administration coalition. So another is lingering legal shadows of martial law, which give the president the power to declare martial law. And several issues were the subject of heated discussions within concern that drifted the law. So, film director Lino Broca was among the members who walked out from the CONCON. So, Broca was responsible in insulting the freedom of expression clause in Article 3, Section 4 as the word freedom. So, it was quite a long read, right? And to sum it all up, the most crucial and contentious issues in the Revolutionary Congress that created the 1899 Malolos Constitution pertained to the separation of church and state, which was by a mere one vote. While in the 1935 Constitution, Malolos Constitution provided the legal basis of the Commonwealth government, which was considered a transition government before the granting of Philippine independence, with American-inspired constitution. So the Philippine government would eventually pattern its government system after American government. And the 1973 Constitution saw the implementation of martial law, and afterwards, the 1986 People Power Revolution, which led to its abolition via the Provisional Freedom Constitution of 1986 and then the ratification of the 1987 Constitution. So that ends my discussion for today. Thank you for watching.